Hello and welcome back to Soundtrack of Your 20s. I'm Michaela, your host, and today we are back with another interview. I'm not going to lie, I'm really excited to share this interview today. We got to interview the Brazen Youth, who recently released their album Eagle Idaho, which is truly a masterpiece in itself. But they wrote one of my all-time favorite songs, Hometown, which has so much beauty in the layers of the song, especially within lyrics. So we're going to do a huge deep dive on that today. But we also just had a really great conversation about unexpected change that happens in life and kind of dealing with that in itself. So before we dive into all of that, I truly think that this episode is the perfect episode to kind of relaunch this podcast because there's been a lot of change that's going on here. So let's catch up for a bit. So first major life update, we changed our name, which I'm really hoping you have noticed by now. But if you didn't notice, hello, welcome. I hope you're new here. This podcast used to be called Alternative Music Lyrics Annotated. That name's actually been around for, I think, around 2 years, maybe 3. And this third season that we were producing was supposed to be called Soundtrack of Your 20s. But with each episode I produced, kind of bringing in these artist interviews that we've done forever, and then other stories from people that have gone through these moments that we talk about. I just realized that this is exactly where I want the podcast to go, and these are the exact interviews that I love to do, and I love to bring the stories together. So that's kind of the rationale behind it. I truly am in love with this name, and even though I'm 23, and I guess technically I only have 7 more years of being in your 20s, I really think the 20s are more of a mindset, and I fully intend to be living out the soundtrack of my 20s until however long you guys let me. Okay, second life update. I actually got a job, which is crazy to say out loud. If you listened to our last episode, Quarter Life Crisis, you might have caught the hint that I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life after college. I was kind of in this unique position where I knew I wanted a creative job in the music industry, but I had no idea what that meant. And in that episode, we actually talked with the author Satya Doyle Biak, who wrote Quarter Life, and Taylor Bickett, who wrote Quarter Life Crisis. And there's a moment in that episode where I realized that I was holding myself back from my own creative abilities. And it literally, within 5 days of posting that episode, everything kind of happened. So that's kind of where I've been. But the good news is, now I work as a graphic designer, and I realized that this podcast needed some TLC, especially on the branding. I feel like I love branding just in general, and I'd always wanted to redo this podcast branding. But now I kind of feel like with a new name change and a little bit clearer direction, it was the perfect time. So with that, I've really kind of narrowed down the show that I really want this podcast Instagram to be about exploring life and music in your 20s, whatever that means. So I plan to be sharing a bit more of my art and creative venture projects that I end up going on, as well as all the podcast content. So you'll definitely want to follow our Instagram at Soundtrack of Your 20s. Okay, I think that's all I have on my side. If you've been here for a while, thanks for going through all the turbulence. I am just really, really, really excited about the direction of the podcast, the direction of the Instagram, and where everything's going. I just feel like everything's kind of making sense, even though it didn't there for a while. And I'm so excited to share what I have coming up in the works, but even more excited to share this episode. So with that, let's get into the interview with the Brazen Youth. So today we are sitting down with Nick and Charlie from the Brazen Youth. I've always been a big fan of their music and specifically their sound. I feel like it's a really cool mix of Bon Iver and the Gradient Committee, very folksy alternative, which I guess can be explained with how they kind of got started as a band.
Yeah, I mean, so Micah unfortunately is not here, but this is Nick and Charlie. Charlie and I started playing music together. We were like in 8th grade, long time ago. Um, how many years ago is that now?
I know.
11 years ago?
We were freshmen in high school, 2012. That was our first year. So
Yeah.
Like 11 years we've been playing music together.
Yeah, but now we're right in the middle of our 20s, so it's fitting for the podcast. But yeah, we started long time ago, and we mostly did covers, specifically a lot of Red Hot Chili Peppers covers for some reason.
Yeah, we used to like go to farmers markets, and God, it feels so cringe, but also it's great beginnings. We would play like a Home by Philip Phillips, like Ho Hey. I would do the hose, and Nick would sing.
Yep.
I had a tambourine pedal, playing farmers markets and stuff. I mean, that was our beginning. We were really young.
Yeah, and there was a point where we had so many. So I would play guitar and sing, and Charlie would play keys and sing, and sometimes guitar. We would play different instruments at times, but we started really wanting like percussion in our sound. So I would, Charlie would have like a cajon, like the little hand drum thing, and then he would have like a tambourine on a pedal, and then I started like hitting a kick drum on a pedal. And then at a certain point, we were like, we need a drummer, like we're just trying to make drums, and
we had
when Micah came into the picture.
Yeah, I think we had a more complicated setup when it was just the two of us than we do as a 5-piece band now.
It was so mechanical. There were just so many moving parts that just like we felt like I don't know, those little like monkey things that clap. Yeah.
Today we are sitting down to talk about their new album, Eagle Idaho, which is a really amazing album, but I think a beauty of it kind of lies in the eyes of the listener. I guess let's jump into maybe Eagle Idaho. Like if you had to describe this album in like a word or a feeling, like how would you guys describe it?
I feel like there's like a nostalgia, maybe. There's a lot of like like I don't know, like yearning for that childhood, like hopefulness again or something. It's one that comes to mind.
I would say loss and growth and gratitude for sure. That's what I would.
There's a song called Changing on the record, so I think growth and change is definitely a big part of it.
And honestly, when I think of how to describe this album, I couldn't agree more. I think words that kind of come up for me is unexpected change that happens in life, and kind of like the growth and gratitude that can come from that as you go through it. And when we talk about nostalgia within this album, I think a huge part of that kind of comes from how long their writing process was for this project. When you guys wrote this album, was everything kind of written at the same time, or is it kind of like a collection of songs that kind of fit those emotions?
Yeah, so Charlie and I do both the writing separately. It's about half and half, so I don't want to speak for you, but a lot of my songs, at least, were kind of throughout a long process of just kind of dealing with emotions, and I think yours were more densely populated in like 1 or 2 months.
Yeah, that's kind of how I think we seem to go. Nick is kind of like always writing, and then I just like every now and then I just kind of like churn out a bunch in a short period of time or something.
Yeah,
I'm like, oh shit, we have an album coming out. I wrote. This album took so long to come out, and it was such like a long rollout. Like some of the songs we probably wrote in 2018, but I want to say we started writing it in 2019, and we recorded it in 2020, had it mixed in 2021, had it mastered in 2022, and now it's 2023. We're putting out like B-sides of the record still. Like it really was. It took up so much of our lives.
I was going to say it's a condensed writing process, but a super long like release process. So it gives you like a ton of time to just sit with the songs. Do you feel like you changed or like heard the songs differently as you kept getting older, or like as the time continued?
Yeah, especially now coming back to them, we listen. I don't really listen to our music very often. I listen to it when we're about to go on tour and we need to remember how the songs go. But yeah, and a lot of these visions of these songs really, even just in the studio, just changed profoundly from the initial writing process to the demo process to the recording process. Whenever we bring them to the studio, we kind of, if let's say like I wrote a song or something, you just kind of have to let go of it once it gets into the hands of the band, and they just change profoundly in that setting. And I like to go back and listen to them sometimes, and just kind of, it's almost like a journal entry in a sense, because you can just be reminded of a feeling that you once had.
And I love the way Nick talks about his writing process, because this album really does feel like a journal entry of sorts. And I feel like it's almost like taking a page out of a journal through a tumultuous period of life out of everyone's book. But in terms of the writing process, there's quite a bit of personal anecdotes and stories in there where they write from.
Yeah, it was done like, I guess, probably a year before we started recording it. And it was a long writing process. There's a lot of things going on, like a lot of different themes in the record. But one theme that was common was, I think we were like all apart. And there was just this feeling of, just profound change. I think every record we make in the future will always kind of have this theme, because we kind of like go apart, we come back, make these records. But yeah, I wrote all of my stuff while I was living in New York, and my dad had just passed, and I was living in New York, and I was like interning at a studio and working at a bagel shop, and I was just very sad. And I would just come home, and like the one good thing I had in my life was like playing basketball and making demos in my apartment. And I just that was like the most creative I'd ever been, and it was like all my grief was just coming out of me in these demos. And that's when I did all of my writing for Eagle Idaho.
So given all the nostalgia, the personal backstory, the change that happened in their lives, I think the biggest question I had going into this interview is, what is the attachment to Eagle Idaho? Because they are kind of a East Coast band. I've never been to Idaho in my life. I probably couldn't even identify it on a map, if I'm being totally honest here.
Totally.
Like, where is Eagle Idaho? What's the place like?
Well, we've been there once. I've been to Idaho once in my life, and we were on tour, and we were staying in Eagle, Idaho, and that was the night that we got the call that my dad had passed unexpectedly. And we had all been like living at the farm with my dad at that time, and we got the call, and we were in Eagle, Idaho, and it was it just, when we were making the record, I think it was Micah just kind of came up with the idea. He was like, what if we called it Eagle, Idaho? And just felt very right. I don't know, the name, like Eagle.
Yeah, we just didn't have a strong name, we were like before, and we were like, okay, it's going to be called Linger There.
Yeah, we were experimenting with like Linger, but we were like, the Cranberries did that. Like, we can't just call it Linger.
Yeah, and it was Micah who came up with that idea, and it made a lot of sense, because a lot of some of these songs were written while on tour, and a lot of the defining moments of the band from the past couple of years have just been out on the road. And what place defines the feeling of both kind of the camaraderie of being on tour, and also just the longing for stability than being thousands of miles away amid a hometown tragedy?
I think when we leave kind of our comfort place or comfort location in life, we tend to realize how much we miss it. And it's always in times of unexpected change and times of like uncertainty where we wish to go back to that place. And I think this is the perfect intro to talk about my favorite track by the Brazen Youth, Hometown. I feel like as you get older, maybe your hometown changes to you and you look at it in a different light, especially after like so much time and change has really happened. I'm dying to know, how'd you write Hometown? What's your hometown like? And like, how did the song kind of evolve?
So I wrote Hometown. After I was living in New York, I came home and I was living at the farm, and I was living there alone, and it was just like a big empty farm. I lived there by myself because my dad had just died, and me and my siblings had inherited his house, and I was just hanging out in there all alone. And I was hanging out in like my childhood bedroom, just like smoking, having my friends over, just like in my old house I grew up in. It was all of a sudden just like Charlie's house, and there was a weird feeling to that. Just a weird like solitude and a weird feeling of like just time passing and like sentimental things passing down. And I just wrote it about, just that, just like the change and, just sitting back up in that bunk room. And, that's what the song is kind of about. Just looking around the house and remembering.
So while Charlie writes a song about going back to his hometown after a huge change in his family life, I think on a smaller scale, we can all kind of relate to the lyrics in the song about going back to your hometown after a lot of time and change has passed, whether that means coming back after college or coming back 30 years later. But I really want to dive in to this concept of moving back to your hometown as I record this podcast from my childhood bedroom. I feel like it's not the thing we like romanticize doing in life, nor do we even really talk about it. Like, I don't hear many people boasting about moving back to their hometown, but in contrast, we did record a podcast episode all about following your dreams to move to a West Coast city, leaving your hometown. And I really want to explore this other side of the coin because honestly, life happens and moving out of your hometown may be the plan, but the actuality, like things change. From my own personal experience, after college, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but the plan was to move out of my hometown. But while I was job searching, it just made more sense to move home rather than go through the whole job search process, apartment search process, all while being unemployed. After 6 months of living at home and finally unpacking the things that I decided I probably had to, I started to just recognize that like this was real. Like I was moving back to my hometown by choice. After 6 months, I'd be pretty solidified here. And being back by choice, not just for like a summer vacation, is a super weird feeling. I felt like I had a lot of resentment to my hometown, a little bit unnecessarily. I just felt like I felt really stuck here. I felt like I had a plan, but a lot of change had happened, and it threw my plan off the rails. And I didn't really know what to do. I mean, to be honest, I still don't really know what to do. I still am recording this in my childhood bedroom, so clearly I'm working through this with everyone else listening. But I think the biggest thing that I've been trying to do, honestly, my top goal right now is instead of being resentful and upset that things didn't go according to plan or that, my timeline got shifted, trying to find the beauty and the silver linings and the tiny things that you notice when you come back to your hometown after a period of time, to just be more present with the situation. And to be honest, I know I don't have the answers to my questions. And when I was thinking about who did and who could contribute to this podcast, I remembered an interview I did with Dr. Tammy Kernodle, who is honestly the smartest woman I have met to date and the most humble person I have ever met. She is a professor at Miami University who specializes in African American music and gender studies in music. And while our conversation was originally about women in music, which we shared on our blog, I personally left our conversation feeling like she gave me the wisdom to solve all of my problems. But I really want to share this clip when we kind of talked about how there kind of is this unrealistic expectation for us to have everything figured out in our lives and have everything go according to plan, but that's so not the reality.
we are a society that really promotes that idea. Very much so, right? We don't necessarily give people time to nurture who they want to be. I agree with you completely. I was in residency at another college last week on the ground. And the discussions that I had with the students I engaged with had very little to do with music and my scholarship. They wanted real life advice and wisdom. Yeah. Like, I don't know what I want to do. And you know what? And I'm going to tell you, you don't have to know.
Right.
I'm 52 and I don't know. I mean, like, I'm still trying to figure this thing out. And so but what I love about your generation is that you will be more transparent than previous generations. Y'all will say, I don't know. And I don't know what I want, and you won't fake it till you make it. So once we were faking it till we could make it.
Yeah.
And that was costly. It was costly.
And I really want to tie this back to this idea of like romanticizing moving out of your hometown. I think it's something that we all feel like we have to do because of a pressure on society from our friends. Like, everyone feels like after college you need to move out to go do something. But I think that it's okay to recognize that sometimes it's just not how it shakes out. But I think the most important thing is that you have to build through that failure to create the life you want, whether that's in your hometown or in a new city, wherever you are, just being present and always actively working towards your future, even if you have no clue where that's going.
See, you have to be just as willing to fail as you are to succeed. We think that failure is it's like the death toll, right? Like it's the casket closing, but it's really a way of coming into awareness of maybe where your purpose is, and also an awareness of what it's going to take to get. I failed and being a concert pianist my first semester of my college. And I'm talking about, I had taken piano for 15 years of my life. And I get to college and then somebody tells me, your hands are too small. You don't play very well. And nobody had ever said that to me. Nobody had ever said, this illusion that you have. And my world came crashing together,
Yeah.
But it led me to look at what I was passionate about. Like, I had to go back and revisit very, very quickly. And I went into music education, and music education opened the door for me. And I took experiences, right? And I took chances. They were not wild chances. I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll go to graduate school, because I knew graduate school was needed to do what I wanted to do,
Right.
And I think that's the thing you have to be willing to do is to say, okay, I'm going to try this. And if it doesn't work, okay, fine. I know that that's not what I'm want to do. I think we tie college too much to a job.
Yeah.
Like it's not a path. It's the beginning of one. And so, from the very beginning, our conversation needs to be, Michaela, you came to college to get knowledge. Yeah. So building knowledge and skill while you are here is what's most important. And then figuring out, how can I take what I got from this experience into this world and create something?
I think that last sentence is something that will stick with me for the rest of my life. How can you take the experiences that you've had and create something? And that's what I'm going to ask everyone, no matter where you're physically located. How can we take time to be present in our lives to create our future? That may sound totally abstract, but I guess what I'm getting at here is that all the time that we could spend being upset that we didn't move out of our hometown, or being upset that we still live at home, or being upset that things aren't going our way, that our life isn't working out exactly how we planned, that's so much time that we're taking away from appreciating and growing through those failures to really find the beauty of the moment in the present and find those little experiences that are going to help create who we are today. Honestly, I feel like no matter what way you shake it, like there is so much unexpected change that's going to happen in our lives, whether you're going through it right now or maybe everything's going according to plan. There's going to be a lot of bumps in the road, and I think that's just the beauty of your early 20s. Living at home for a year was definitely a big bump in my road. I feel like I spent a decent amount of time just being upset that plans had changed and things were going to work out differently, instead of trying to move forward from it. But now that I feel like my life is somewhat more together, I can understand like why this is the way things are. Suddenly that bump in the road, well, it didn't really look like a hurdle anymore. It kind of looked like a small pebble in the rear view. And I think as time goes on, that's how it's supposed to go. Those big hurdles end up looking like small bumps in the road.
You know, that's why I try to tell artists, study your history.
Yeah.
One thing we don't do is study. We only want to study the parts of people's history where they're successful. We don't go back and look and see. So it looks like it's instantaneous that somebody is like on the map or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I'm talking about real artists. Like I'm talking about going back. You study someone like an Aretha Franklin.
Yeah.
Or you study someone like a Patsy Cline or what, or Loretta Lynn, who's still going on. But what it took for her to get to the space that she was in, what she lost, not having the business acumen, and how she resurrected herself, right? You know, and had to reclaim her stuff. You know, the same thing with Taylor Swift. We can look at recent artists and see, you know, what Taylor Swift started it with, what Kelly Clarkson, you know, oftentimes there's a long history of them putting in a lot of grunt work before there's this moment where time and space and purpose kind of intersect. And then let's like, boom, you know, they there. And then it's on. It ain't no slowing down because the train is in full steam, you know. And so I tell artists to go back and study that. And not as a success template, but for understanding and assurance that, yeah, it may not happen tomorrow. It may not happen next year. But there's a chance that it will happen if I keep on honing my craft, if I keep networking, if I keep putting myself out here, you know, it can come together.
I mean, come on. Doesn't that just make you want to meet her even more? I mean, I just fully agree with everything she said, but especially that point that at some point for us all, like time, space, history, passion, purpose, it's all going to align. Whether it's in your hometown, whether it's in a new city, whether it's tomorrow, or maybe it's 10 years from now. But the most important thing we can all be doing is continuing to work towards that craft, continuing to push towards that purpose, and continuing to recognize the small wins and the little beauties in the everyday. It's going to help us find it, whether that's 10 years from now or tomorrow. So speaking of honing your craft, let's get back to Eagle, Idaho with the Brazen Youth. The next track we talk about is called Spirit Find Yours, and they kind of go into the writing process and the rewriting process and the rewriting process about that.
I feel like sometimes you have like songs where you have like a lot of it figured out, and then you also have like a story that isn't exactly what happened, but kind of like relates to it somehow, and you find a way to like tie it in, you know, like kind of connect like. Yeah, I don't know, just like what, like, I feel like when Spirit Finds Yours started out, it may not be about like I'm so not articulate. I'm so much better with a guitar in my hands when I'm coming up with words. I don't know. I think you definitely tied in that story to like a broader theme of that song.
Yeah, I wrote it so long ago. I think that it was written in like April 2020, right after I guess I had returned home because of COVID. I was in school at the time, and all the dorms closed, and it was somewhat about. I guess maybe it was influenced by that a little bit.
Yeah, we definitely with this album we redid every song at least once. I think we're really I think that's like our defining studio characteristic. I'm a recording engineer and I work with bands and stuff for a living, and I've never had a project to take even like a fourth as long as the Brazen Youths, as Eagle Idaho did.
What happens is like we'll spend an entire day tracking. Like Micah was staying at my house with my family during the 6-week long recording of the first half of the album, and we would spend an entire day tracking, and then me and Micah would leave, and Charlie would mix after we left. And every once in a while, we would get a text from Charlie being like, "Guys, we have to redo it all." Like, yeah. And there was always a little bit of a argument that ensued after that, but he was usually right, and we usually ended up just redoing it.
I feel like it's so hard to do stuff I work as a graphic designer, and when I do stuff for the podcast, it takes me hours to do it, but when I do it for like work stuff, it takes me maybe 2 minutes. Like, and it's
Exactly.
just, I don't know how you get over it. What do they call it? Imposter syndrome, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
At least personally, I'm feeling it big time. But I can only imagine doing it over again and over again, especially, I mean, I do want to talk about Cow, because I will say when I heard it the first time through, I was like, well, I had to double check what I was listening to. I felt like Miles gave this album a little bit. Yeah, I was like, what's going on here? What was kind of like, what caused you to explore maybe a little bit of jazz? It sounded like a saxophone. I don't know.
The saxophone was done by our bass player, John Lisi. He plays in our live band with us, and he lives nearby to my hometown where the studio is. And so he came by and recorded that sax. But the jazz influence was very much like because of Charles Mingus and Joni Mitchell and the Mingus record that Joni did. It's one of my favorite records ever. It's so expressive. It's so like jarring and beautiful. And that was kind of just a big inspiration of Cal. Just like things that would just hit you and you had to double check. You're like, what am I listening to?
Was there any like meaning behind the track list of it all, or like the order within?
We definitely liked the idea of, if it were a record, that ending the A side.
Yeah.
And then just kind of, ending it in chaos. I forget what starts the B side, but
Saving?
Or one thing left to dress up for, I think.
That's the one thing we definitely do. Like, we don't have like a storyline on this record or anything, but we have like sonic transitions between what we would picture as sides. And I think if it went on a vinyl, it may not even fit that way. Like that may not even end up being the A and B side, but we view it as a front and back half, or side B and side C or something.
Yeah. And the album is kind of divided into 3.
Yeah.
It's like a trifecta.
I agree.
Because there's like a transition between Saving, Who Told You That You Were Naked, and Linger There. Those are kind of one element. And then yeah, I honestly don't really. We did it so long ago. I'm having trouble remembering.
I think it was all sonic. It was just like these things sound better together. We just wanted it to like sound right.
Yeah.
Right. Like a good flow. I feel like that's so important. I'm also someone that believes you should listen to an album like top to bottom. I really hate the shuffle feature. It drives me nuts.
Oh my God.
Because I just feel like it sounds different and you listen to it differently. I don't know.
Totally.
Personal preference, which I guess maybe let's go into I've Never Killed Anything That Lived. You kind of hinted that maybe this was like an extension of Eagle Idaho. It's your most recent single you put out. Tell me about this song.
Yeah, it was just like a little country song that I wrote one day, and I had sent Charlie and Micah this like, it was like a piano recording, right? Or maybe it was like
it was a picked guitar. It was like
picked guitar. Yeah, and just kind of sent it over to them, and we liked it. We didn't really want to touch it too much because we just felt like in its simplicity it worked. And it just didn't. We had recorded it while we were doing the session for the album, and we recorded it pretty much live, and we really liked it, but we just didn't feel like it totally fit on the album. We always kind of pictured it as a B-side, even when we were making the album. We knew that it existed with that sort of like family of songs, but maybe just didn't really fit on the album. And that's pretty much all it really was. Yeah, just country song.
It fits within that period of like change and nostalgia, which I guess to round it out, I'll ask you guys. This album just screams nostalgia to me. I feel like I said, it feels like something that you should listen to at like your favorite childhood spot as an adult, if that's like a niche album topic to listen to. If you had to listen to a song from the album in a location, city, area, vibe, I don't know, what song would it be and where would you listen to it?
I would listen to You Started Loving in Outer Space.
Right. That's cool.
It's like a good outer space song.
Yeah.
Are we talking like within Earth visibility or like simple wormhole?
I think I would listen to I've Never Killed Anything That Lived in like Wyoming or something. Just like in a desert or a plain and just kind of listen to it and be like, yeah, nice.
Yeah, maybe like Spirit Hunt Yours, like in my tracksuit, like just going for a power walk in Worcester.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Wow. Lovely. I love it. Okay, well, finally, do you guys have anything coming out soon? How can people find you? Is there like any shows you guys are doing that coming up?
Yeah, so, all the socials were the Brazen Youth. We do have some more B-sides coming out that we're working on, just trying to, some last touches, and we might have some shows this spring, but we do have some shows this spring, but we just haven't announced them yet.
Yeah.
But, yes.
And so whether you're listening to this in your childhood bedroom or you're listening to this driving to a new city where you're living, I think if we've proven anything on this podcast, it's that there's beauty in both. I think that this episode was truly about uncertainty, growth, and change. And the best thing we can all do is to just be present with wherever we are in whatever we're going through, because there's so much growth that can come through it and so much gratitude that we can gain from it all. That's our episode. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you again to the Brazen Youth and Dr. Tammy Kernodle. If you want to listen to our full interview with Dr. Kernodle, I'll put a link to it in the description to our blog, where you can read about everything we talked about. As always, please give this podcast a rating on whatever platform you're listening on. It's so helpful. And hit us up in our DMs if you like this episode at Soundtrack of Your 20s on Instagram. We'll be posting tons of playlists and different kind of content for this episode, which I'm really excited to share. So thanks so much for listening, and we will see you on the next pod to discover the soundtrack of our 20s.